Michael Jackson was not just talented. Talent can explain a good voice. Talent can explain rhythm. Talent can explain a natural sense of movement. But talent does not explain why one person becomes impossible to forget. Because there have been many talented singers, many gifted dancers, many performers with charisma, ambition, and fame. But Michael Jackson became something different. He became a memory stored inside culture. A glove, a hat, a lean, a scream, a silence before the beat drops, a movement so precise that the body almost seems to stop obeying ordinary physics. And the real question is not, how did he become famous? The real question is deeper than that. What kind of mind studies attention so carefully that millions of people cannot look away? What kind of discipline turns pain, pressure, childhood, perfectionism, imagination, and fear into performance? And what does his genius reveal about the hidden relationship between obsession, identity, and greatness? This is not just the story of an artist. It is the psychology of becoming unforgettable. One of the easiest ways to misunderstand Michael Jackson is to explain him with one word: talent. Talent is a clean word. It makes greatness feel simple. It lets us say he was born with it, and then avoid the harder question: what was trained? What was repeated? What was sacrificed? What was studied so deeply that later it looked natural? Because the strange thing about mastery is that when it becomes advanced enough, it stops looking like work. The beginner shows effort. The professional hides effort. The master makes effort look like instinct. That is why Michael could seem almost unreal on stage. The voice, the timing, the movement, the stillness, the precision, it all appeared effortless. But effortlessness is often the final disguise of obsession. He was not only singing songs or dancing to music, he was studying impact. A glove was not just a glove. A hat was not just a hat, not just a pause. A lean was not just a trick. These became psychological anchors, simple images the mind could store immediately. And this matters because the human brain does not remember everything. It remembers contrast. It remembers surprise. It remembers emotion. It remembers symbols. Most performers try to fill the stage. Michael knew how to control it. He understood, whether consciously or intuitively, that attention is not created only by movement. Sometimes, attention is created by stopping, by making the audience wait, by holding silence 1 second longer than expected. That is why the moment before he moved could feel as powerful as the movement itself. The brain is always predicting what comes next. When something happens exactly as expected, attention relaxes. But when the pattern breaks in a satisfying way, attention sharpens. Michael built his performances around that principle. Stillness, then explosion. Softness, then intensity. Mystery, then release. Precision, then emotion. This is what made him different. He did not just perform inside the song. He designed the viewer's experience of the song. There is a lesson here that goes beyond music. Most people practice only the obvious part of what they do. They practice the task, but not the presence. They improve the skill, but ignore the timing. They focus on output, but forget the emotional residue they leave behind. Michael's genius shows that excellence is not only about being good, it is about being intentional. It is about understanding how your actions are received, felt, remembered, and repeated inside the mind of another person. That is not fake. That is not manipulation in the cheap sense. It is awareness. A great performer understands that people do not only respond to ability, they respond to the meaning wrapped around ability. The entrance, the posture, the silence, the detail, the feeling that something is about to happen. Michael Jackson became unforgettable because he gave the audience more than skill. He gave them moments. And moments are what the mind keeps. This is why calling him talented is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Talent may have opened the door, but discipline, repetition, sensitivity, image, timing, and psychological instinct built the legend. His genius was not only in what he could do, It was in how deeply he understood what performance does to the human mind.
To understand Michael Jackson's genius, you have to understand one thing first. He did not simply become a performer. He grew up inside performance. For most people, identity forms in private. You make mistakes before anyone is watching. You try things badly. You change your mind. You discover who you are slowly, without a crowd measuring your value. But when someone performs from a very young age, the mirror changes. The mirror becomes applause, reaction, approval, expectation. The room starts telling you who you are before you have fully had time to meet yourself. And that can create something extraordinary. A person like that learns how to read attention almost physically. They notice when energy rises. They notice when it drops. They feel the audience before the audience says anything. Michael seemed to have that kind of radar. He did not perform like someone simply repeating choreography. He performed like someone listening to the nervous system of the crowd. He knew when to delay, when to strike, when to soften, when to explode, when to hold still for one extra second. That is not just musical intelligence. That is emotional intelligence turned into movement. But there is a cost hidden inside that kind of sensitivity. When approval, safety, love, and attention become connected to performance early in life, performance can stop being only something you do. It can become where you feel most real. For many people, work is separate from identity. They can fail at something and still feel like themselves. But for a performer shaped by the stage, the line can become thinner. The performance becomes proof. Proof that you matter. Proof that people still want you. Proof that you can control the room. Proof that the fragile thing inside you can be turned into something powerful. This is where greatness becomes complicated. Because the same sensitivity that allows someone to move millions of people can also make peace harder to find. The nervous system that notices every shift in a crowd may also notice every judgment, every comparison, every disappointment, every sign that the world is no longer satisfied. And when that sensitivity meets fame, control becomes a kind of protection. Control the sound, control the movement, control the image, control the lighting, control the entrance, control the mystery. From the outside, people may call it perfectionism, but perfectionism is often deeper than wanting things to look polished. Sometimes perfectionism is an attempt to reduce emotional danger. If the work is perfect, maybe they cannot reject me. If the performance is perfect, maybe I can breathe. If the next thing is extraordinary enough, maybe the fear will quiet down. This is not a diagnosis. It is a human pattern. Many high-performing people know this feeling. They are not only chasing success, they are trying to outrun something inside themselves. And that may be part of why Michael's work carried so much intensity. There was urgency in it. He often performed as if ordinary excellence was not enough. The movement had to be sharper. The image had to be stronger. The moment had to be unforgettable. Not good, undeniable. That word matters, because being good can still be ignored. Being good can still be questioned. Being good can still leave you exposed. But being undeniable feels safer, at least for a moment. And this is one of the quiet contradictions of genius. The very pressure that can damage a person can also sharpen their art. The very sensitivity that can make life heavy can also make expression precise. Michael Jackson became magnetic because he did not seem to perform from the surface. He performed from tension. And tension is what makes art feel alive. Beneath the technique, beneath the fame, beneath the spectacle, there was a human being trying to turn pressure into beauty. And millions of people felt it, even if they could not explain why.
One of the most important parts of Michael Jackson's genius was that he understood something many people never learn. Detail is not decoration. Detail is communication. Most people see the obvious thing first. They see the dance, the song, the costume, the stage, the lights. But what makes a performance stay in the mind is often much smaller. A tilt of the head, a hand frozen in the air, a foot placed at the exact angle, silence before the first move, a jacket catching light at the right second, a facial expression held just long enough to become iconic. Michael seemed to understand that the smallest choices could carry emotional weight. That is what separates someone who performs from someone who creates a world. Performer asks, "What am I going to do?" A world builder asks, what will they feel before, during, and after I do it? And Michael was not simply trying to be watched. He was creating an atmosphere. This is why his image became so powerful. The glove, the hat, the socks, the jacket, the silhouette, these things were not random. They became symbols. And symbols matter because they allow the mind to recognize something instantly. You did not need to see his face. Sometimes the outline was enough. That is rare. Most people are recognized by their name. Some are recognized by their face. Very few are recognized by a shape, a gesture, or a shadow. That is not an accident. That is identity built with precision. And this is where discipline becomes more interesting. Because most people think discipline is only about forcing yourself to do difficult things. Waking up early, working longer, saying no, pushing harder. But at the highest level, discipline is not only force. It is refinement. It is the willingness to return to the same detail again and again until it stops being average. Movement is not just practiced until it can be done. It is practiced until it creates the exact feeling it is supposed to create. A vocal line is not just repeated until it is correct. It is repeated until it carries the right emotional temperature. A performance is not finished when nothing is wrong. It is finished when something becomes undeniable. That is a different standard, and it requires a mind that can tolerate repetition without becoming numb to it. Most people get bored once they understand something. They want novelty. They want the next idea, the next project, the next rush of beginning again. But mastery often begins after boredom. It begins when the obvious improvement is already done, and now you are working on things most people will never consciously notice. The exact timing, the weight of a pause, the angle of the shoulders, the transition between two movements. This is why genius can look excessive from the outside. People may ask, why does that tiny detail matter? But the master knows the answer, because tiny details are not tiny when millions of nervous systems are receiving them. A small imperfection can break the spell. Small adjustment can deepen it. Michael Jackson's perfectionism, at least in his work, seemed connected to this kind of spell-making. He was not only trying to avoid mistakes, he was trying to create immersion. He wanted the audience to enter a moment and stay there. That requires more than talent. It requires a strange respect for the unseen. The parts no one praises directly. The hours no one records. The corrections no one notices. The private frustration behind public effortlessness. This is one of the reasons people underestimate greatness. They see the final version and assume it came from magic. But magic is often just discipline with the evidence removed. The audience sees 3 minutes. The artist remembers years. And there is something almost painful about that, because the world often rewards the appearance of ease while ignoring the cost of becoming effortless. But maybe that is also why Michael's performances had such power. They felt polished, but not empty. Precise, but not cold. Controlled, but still emotional. That balance is difficult. Too much control, and the work becomes mechanical. Too much emotion, and it becomes messy. But when control and emotion meet, something memorable happens. You feel both the human being and the machine, the vulnerability and the discipline, the feeling and the form. That was part of Michael's genius. He took emotion and gave it structure. He took imagination and gave it choreography. He took sensitivity and turned it into symbols people could remember. And that may be one of the deeper lessons of his success. A powerful life is not built only by having strong feelings. It is built by learning how to give those feelings a form, because emotion without form disappears. But emotion shaped by discipline can become something that outlives the moment. There is another layer to Michael Jackson's genius that is easy to miss. He understood mystery, not mystery as a cheap trick, not mystery as pretending to be strange just to get attention, but mystery as a psychological force. Girls and Morgid delight betence. The Vincent de Bosger. The human mind is drawn to what it cannot fully complete. When something is clear enough to recognize but not so clear that it becomes ordinary, attention stays alive. Michael lived in that space. He was familiar and unreachable at the same time. People knew the songs, they knew the dances, they knew the glove, the hat, the voice, the silhouette. but there was always a distance around him, a feeling that the public image did not fully explain the private person. And that distance made the image stronger, because fame alone does not create fascination. Some people are famous everywhere and still feel forgettable. Michael became different because he did not only perform songs. He built a world. The glove, the hat, military jackets, the short films, the choreography, the way he could stand completely still and somehow make the silence feel loud. Together, these things became a language. And once a person becomes a language, they no longer need to explain themselves every time. One gesture carries the story. One pose brings back the memory. One silhouette becomes enough. That is what powerful identity does. It turns complexity into symbols the mind can hold. This is why Michael's success cannot be separated from imagination. He did not present himself only as a singer. He created scenes, characters, atmospheres, and visual worlds. He turned music into cinema. He turned dance into image. He turned performance into mythology. And mythology matters because it gives people a place to put their feelings. When people watched him, they were not only hearing a song. They were entering a heightened reality where innocence, danger, beauty, loneliness, rhythm, fear, and escape could exist together. That mixture was powerful because it had contrast. And contrast is one of the secrets of memorability. Michael carried contradictions. Childlike and precise, gentle and explosive, fragile and commanding, human and almost unreal. People are rarely fascinated by what is easy to categorize. They are fascinated by what holds opposites together. That is why some artists become more than entertainers. They become mirrors. People look at them and see something they cannot fully name inside themselves. The part that wants to be seen, the part that wants to disappear, the part that wants control, the part that wants freedom, the part that feels too sensitive for the world, but still wants to turn that sensitivity into something beautiful. Michael's genius was that he gave those inner contradictions a visible form. He made them move. And this is where the lesson becomes personal. Most people think identity is something you find, but identity is also something you build. Not in a fake way, not as a mask, but as a deliberate expression of what you value, what you repeat, and what you choose to become recognizable for. Michael Jackson did not become unforgettable only because he had gifts. He became unforgettable because he turned those gifts into a coherent world. Many people have ability, but no world. They have skills, but no emotional signature. They have effort, but no identity strong enough to be remembered. And maybe that is one of the quiet questions his life leaves behind. Not how do I become famous, but what do people feel when they experience my work? What do I repeat often enough to become known for it? What am I turning into a symbol? Because over time, identity is not built by what you announce. It is built by what you consistently make real. Michael Jackson understood that in performance. His genius was not only that people watched him, it was that they remembered him in symbols. And when a human being becomes symbolic, they stop being only a person in the public mind. They become a feeling people can return to. There is a dangerous mistake people make when they study greatness. They romanticize pain. They look at someone extraordinary and say, maybe the suffering created the genius. But that is not quite right. Pain does not automatically make people great. Most pain just hurts. It can shrink a person. It can confuse them. It can make them defensive, distracted, bitter, or afraid. Pain by itself is not noble. It is not beautiful. It is not a strategy. What matters is what the person learns to do with it. And this is where Michael Jackson becomes psychologically interesting, because so much of his art seemed to carry a deep emotional charge. Not just joy, not just rhythm, not just entertainment. There was longing in it, a desire to escape, a desire to be seen, a desire to be loved without being fully understood, a desire to turn inner pressure into something the world could feel. This is one reason people connected with him beyond language and culture, because emotion travels faster than explanation. You do not need to understand every lyric to feel urgency. You do not need to know the full story behind a performance to sense that something real is moving underneath it. And Michael had a way of making emotion physical. He did not only sing sadness, he moved it. He did not only express tension, he placed it in the body. A sharp turn, a sudden freeze, a hand across the chest, a step backward that felt like retreat and control at the same time. These choices made feeling visible, and that is one of the deepest functions of art. Art gives shape to what people cannot easily say. Most people carry emotions they never fully translate. They are tired, but they call it being busy. They are lonely, but they call it needing space. They are afraid, but they call it being realistic. They are disappointed, but they call it moving on. A great artist takes these unnamed feelings and gives them a form. Suddenly, the audience says, "I do not know why, but I feel this." That is not accidental. That is emotional precision. And Michael's genius was not only technical precision, it was emotional precision. He understood that people do not only want to be impressed, they want to be moved. They want to feel something they have been carrying privately, but could not organize into words. This is why a performance can become more than entertainment. It can become relief. For a few minutes, the feeling has somewhere to go. This is also why discipline mattered so much in his work. Because raw emotion is powerful, but unstable, it spills everywhere. It can become chaos if it is not shaped. Discipline gives emotion a container. Without discipline, pain may only become noise. With discipline, pain can become rhythm. Pressure can become timing. Sensitivity can become detail. Loneliness can become atmosphere. Fear can become intensity. That does not make the pain good. And there is something here for anyone trying to build a better life. You may not be performing on a stage. You may not be creating music. But you still have to decide what to do with the pressure you carry. Some people numb it. Some people complain about it. Some people pass it to others. Some people let it quietly harden them. But a more disciplined mind asks a different question. Can this be transformed? Not denied. Not dramatized. Not used as an excuse. Transformed. This is one of the mature forms of self-control. It is not pretending you feel nothing. It is taking what you feel and refusing to be ruled by it. Michael Jackson's work reminds us that expression and discipline are not opposites. At the highest level, they need each other. Emotion gives the work life. Discipline gives the work form. And when both meet, something powerful happens. The private becomes universal. The personal becomes symbolic. The wound does not disappear, but it becomes part of a language other people can understand. Maybe this is why people across the world felt connected to him, not because they knew his inner life completely. They did not. But because his performances carried something recognizable. The hunger to be free, the ache to be loved, the need to become more than what wounded you. That is a deeply human thing. And maybe this is one of the quiet reasons his genius endured. He did not only entertain people, he gave emotion a body. And when emotion takes form, people remember it. One of the quiet reasons Michael Jackson became so powerful is that he did not treat the body like something separate from the mind. For him, the body became an instrument of thought. Most people think of discipline as something mental. You decide. You commit. You push through resistance. But at the highest level, discipline moves into the body. The body starts to remember what the mind has repeated long enough. A step becomes automatic. Turn becomes natural. Pause becomes instinct. Gesture becomes language. This is why great performers can make impossible things look easy. They are not thinking through every movement in the moment. They have trained the body so deeply that the body can speak without hesitation. Michael's dancing had that quality. It did not feel like movement added on top of music. It felt like the music had entered his nervous system and found a body to escape through. A kind of mastery requires more than practice. It requires embodiment. And embodiment is different from knowledge. You can know what discipline means and still not live disciplined. You can know what confidence means and still collapse under pressure. You can know what excellence requires and still avoid the discomfort that would shape you. Knowledge lives in the mind. Embodiment lives in the habits, the posture, the timing, the reaction. the way you behave when nobody is giving you credit. Michael Jackson's genius showed the difference. He did not only understand rhythm, he embodied rhythm. He did not only understand performance, he embodied performance. He did not only understand attention, he made his body a tool for directing it. And this is where many people misunderstand greatness. They think greatness is a decision. But most greatness is not built in the dramatic moment. It is built before the dramatic moment, in repetition that looks boring from the outside. Same movement again, same phrase again, same transition again, the same detail again, until the body stops negotiating. That is a powerful phrase. The body stops negotiating. Because most people are constantly negotiating with themselves. Should I start? Should I stop? Do I feel like it? Is this worth it? What if I fail? What if I am tired? What if no one notices? But disciplined repetition slowly removes some of that negotiation. Not because you become emotionless, because you have trained a deeper part of yourself to understand this is who we are now. That is identity-based discipline. At first, you force the action, then you repeat the action. Then the action starts to change your self-image. And eventually, the action feels less like something you are trying to do and more like something you would feel strange not doing. That is when discipline becomes identity. Michael Jackson did not seem to step on stage, hoping he could become Michael Jackson for the night. He had repeated the language of that identity until the stage revealed it. The audience saw the result, but the result was only the visible tip of an invisible system. And that is the part people often miss. They want the moment without the system. They want the confidence without the repetition. They want the recognition without the private standard. They want the freedom of mastery without submitting to the boredom that mastery requires. But the body does not lie. Under pressure, the body reveals what has been practiced. If you have practiced avoidance, avoidance appears. If you have practiced panic, panic appears. If you have practiced precision, precision appears. If you have practiced presence, presence appears. This is why rehearsal matters, not only in art, but in life. The way you respond to stress is rehearsed. The way you handle rejection is rehearsed. The way you keep promises to yourself is rehearsed. The way you return after failure is rehearsed. You are always training something. Even when you think you are doing nothing, you are teaching the nervous system what to expect from you. Michael's greatness reminds us that the body eventually becomes a record of what we repeat, not what we admire, not what we intend, what we repeat. And this is both uncomfortable and freeing. Uncomfortable because it removes the illusion that we can become different while living the same patterns. Freeing because it means identity is not fixed. It can be trained slowly, privately, repeatedly. The mind gives the direction, but the body carries the proof. And when a person trains long enough, something changes. The action stops looking forced. The discipline disappears into presence. And what the world calls genius may, in part, be the visible result of a private body that has been trained not to hesitate. There is a point where success stops being only a reward. It becomes pressure. At the beginning, people work to be seen. They want recognition. They want proof that their effort matters. They want the world to notice what they have been carrying quietly. But when recognition becomes enormous, it changes shape. The applause that once feels like love can slowly become expectation, and expectation can become a cage. This is one of the most psychologically difficult parts of becoming legendary. The world does not only enjoy what you create, it starts demanding that you remain the version of yourself it fell in love with. Be brilliant again. Surprise us again. Move us again. Be young again. Be perfect again. Be what we remember. That is an impossible assignment for a human being. And yet, many public figures live inside that assignment for years. Michael Jackson's genius cannot be separated from this pressure. Once a person becomes iconic, they are no longer experienced as ordinary. People stop seeing only the work. They start seeing the symbol. And symbols are not allowed to be tired. They are not allowed to be confused. They are not allowed to age naturally. They are not allowed to disappoint. They are not allowed to simply exist. But a person is still a person. This is the tragedy hidden inside extreme admiration. The more the world turns someone into an image, the less room that person may have to be unfinished. And every human being is unfinished, no matter how gifted, no matter how disciplined, no matter how loved. This is why the psychology of greatness must include the psychology of cost, because achievement does not erase need, fame does not erase loneliness, applause does not automatically create inner safety. Sometimes applause can even make loneliness sharper. Because when everyone loves the image, the private self may wonder, would they still love me without the performance? That question is heavy. And for someone whose life has been shaped by attention, it can become almost impossible to separate being valued from being extraordinary. This is where many high performers suffer quietly. They are admired for what they produce, but they are rarely allowed to be seen without producing. They become useful to the world in a very specific form. The world says, "Give us your gift." But the deeper human need says, "Can I be more than my gift?" That tension can follow a person everywhere. It can follow them into work, relationships, silence, exhaustion, and even rest. Because rest may feel dangerous when your identity has been built around being exceptional. If I stop, will I still matter? If I slow down, will they forget me? If I am ordinary for a moment, will I lose the thing that makes me loved? These are not small questions. They are identity questions. This is why the story of genius should never be told only as inspiration. Inspiration without honesty becomes fantasy. Yes, we can learn from Michael Jackson's discipline, imagination, precision, and emotional power. But we should also learn from the burden of becoming a symbol. Because most people say they want greatness, but they have not asked what kind of life their version of greatness would require. What would it demand from your peace, from your privacy, from your relationships, from your ability to be imperfect, from your ability to rest without guilt? This does not mean we should avoid ambition. It means ambition needs wisdom. A person can build something meaningful without turning themselves into a machine for approval. A person can pursue excellence without making every mistake feel like a threat to their identity. A person can be disciplined without becoming cruel to themselves. And maybe this is one of the most mature lessons we can take from studying someone like Michael Jackson. Greatness needs structure, but it also needs humanity. Because if the gift grows while the person disappears, something has gone wrong. The goal is not to be remembered at the cost of being whole. The goal is to build something powerful without losing the part of you that still needs quiet, friendship, rest, honesty, and room to be human. Michael Jackson became unforgettable because he gave the world moments that felt larger than life. But behind every larger-than-life figure, there is still a nervous system, a body, history, private self trying to survive the public image. And maybe the deeper question is not only how someone becomes legendary. Maybe the deeper question is, how do you build greatness without abandoning yourself? If you are still here with me this far into the video, let me say something simple. Subscribe to the channel and stay close, because this channel is not about quick motivation. It is about understanding the hidden patterns behind discipline, emotion, identity, success, and the human mind. And if you are drawn to this kind of reflection, there is probably a reason. You are not just looking for information. You are looking for a clearer way to understand yourself. Now let's return to Michael, because one of the final layers of his genius is this: he understood transformation. Not change in the shallow sense. Not changing clothes, changing sound, changing style, changing the surface. Transformation is deeper than that. Transformation is what happens when a person repeatedly takes what they are given: talent, pain, pressure, fear, imagination, sensitivity, and turns it into something with form. Most people wait to feel ready before they become different. They wait for confidence. They wait for clarity. They wait for the perfect season. They wait for the fear to leave. But real transformation often begins while the fear is still present. You do not become disciplined after you stop resisting discipline. You become disciplined by meeting resistance repeatedly until your identity changes. You do not become confident after every doubt disappears. You become confident by acting with doubt in the room. You do not become memorable by trying to impress everyone. You become memorable by refining something true until it becomes unmistakable. Michael Jackson's genius was not just that he changed popular music. It was that he turned himself into a complete expression. Sound, image, movement, mystery, emotion, detail, timing, and all of it pointed in the same direction. That is rare. Most people live fragmented. They want one thing but repeat another. They admire discipline but practice escape. They want peace but feed chaos. They want respect but betray their own standards in private. They want a new identity but keep rehearsing the old one. And then they feel confused when life does not change. But the mind is always watching. Your mind watches what you repeat. Your body watches what you tolerate. Your confidence watches whether your actions match your promises. This is why identity cannot be built by desire alone. It is built by evidence. Every day, you are giving yourself evidence of who you are. Not through dramatic speeches, not through big plans, not through how inspired you feel at midnight, through repetition, through what you return to after the emotion fades. That is where Michael's story becomes useful beyond fame. You do not need to become a global icon to learn from his psychology. You can learn from the seriousness of craft, the seriousness of detail, the seriousness of repetition, seriousness of turning emotion into form instead of letting it remain chaos. Because there is a version of you that will never appear if you only wait to feel ready. It has to be trained out of you. Slowly, through choices that feel too small to matter at first. The way you speak when you are tired. The way you work when nobody is watching. The way you recover after failure. The way you protect your attention. The way you stop negotiating with the part of you that only wants comfort. Greatness in any field is not built by intensity alone. Intensity starts things. Systems continue them. And identity protects them. This is where many people break down. They get inspired, they begin, they feel the first resistance, and then they assume resistance means something is wrong. But resistance is not always a sign that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes resistance is the old identity trying to survive. It is the familiar self saying, "Come back. This is uncomfortable. This is not who we are." And discipline answers, quietly, "Not anymore." That is transformation. Not becoming someone else overnight, but becoming less available to the patterns that kept you small. Michael Jackson's life was complex. No honest person should turn it into a simple motivational poster. But his work does reveal something powerful. A human being can take sensitivity and sharpen it. Take pressure and shape it. Take imagination and organize it. Take repetition and turn it into a language. And maybe that is the real psychology of genius. Not that genius feels easy, but that genius keeps returning to the work until the work begins to carry the weight of the person behind it. So when we talk about Michael Jackson's genius, we have to be careful not to make it too simple. It was not just talent. It was not just fame. It was not just dancing, singing, timing, image, or mystery. It was the combination, a rare combination of sensitivity and discipline. Emotion and structure, imagination and repetition, pain and performance, control and vulnerability. That is what made him so difficult to ignore, because people do not remember only perfection. They remember feeling. They remember the moment something made them debile, in and pay attention. And Michael Jackson had a way of creating those moments again and again. He understood that the mind needs symbols, the body needs rhythm, the audience needs contrast. The heart needs something real underneath the spectacle. That is why his work lasted, not because every part of his life was simple. It was not. Not because greatness protects a person from struggle. It does not. But because, in his best work, something deeply human was given form. The desire to escape the ordinary, the hunger to be seen, the fear of being forgotten, the need to turn inner pressure into beauty, the discipline to make emotion precise. And maybe this is why his story still pulls people in. Because beneath the legend, there is a question every person understands in some form. What do I do with what I carry? What do I do with my sensitivity? What do I do with my fear? What do I do with my ambition? What do I do with the part of me that wants more, but also wants to hide? Most people wait for life to become easier before they become serious. But the people who create something meaningful usually learn a different lesson. They learn to work with what is there: the doubt, the pressure, the imperfect past, the restless mind, the private hunger for something better. They stop waiting for a cleaner version of themselves to begin. They begin with the unfinished self, and through repetition, that self changes. Many times the way inside most are all subsystem. This may be the most useful lesson in studying a figure like Michael Jackson. Not that you should imitate his life, not that you should chase fame, not that you should turn yourself into a symbol for the world, but that whatever gift, discipline, intelligence, or sensitivity you have will remain vague until you give it form. A feeling is not enough. Dream is not enough. Even talent is not enough. At some point, the invisible has to become visible. Through practice, through standards, through detail, through the courage to return to the same work after the excitement is gone. That is where identity is built, not in the fantasy of who you could be, but in the evidence you create when no one is applauding. Michael Jackson became unforgettable because his work carried evidence. Evidence of rehearsal, evidence of imagination, evidence of obsession, evidence of emotional precision, evidence of someone trying, again and again, to make the inner world visible. And that is why the word genius can be misleading if we use it carelessly. Because sometimes we call something genius when we do not want to look closely at the cost, the repetition, the loneliness, the discipline, and the private were behind it. But when we do look closely, the lesson becomes more honest. Greatness is not magic. It is a relationship with pressure. Some people are crushed by pressure. Some people run from it. Some people become addicted to it. And a rare few learn how to shape it into something the world can feel. That does not make the pressure easy. It makes it meaningful. And maybe that is where we should leave this. Michael Jackson's genius was not only that he performed better than other people. It was that he turned performance into memory. He turned movement into language. He turned discipline into emotion. He turned himself into a symbol. And whether you admire him as an artist, study him as a cultural figure, or simply try to understand how a person becomes unforgettable, one thing is clear: the world does not remember what you almost became. It remembers what you gave form to. So the question is not whether you have something inside you. Most people do. The question is whether you will refine it long enough for it to become real. If this video gave you a new way to see Michael Jackson, or a new way to think about your own discipline, subscribe to the channel. Share this with 5 people who would understand this kind of reflection. Leave a sincere comment with what part stayed with you. And tell me what subject, artist, or psychological pattern you want me to explore next. Because sometimes understanding another person's genius is really a quiet way of asking what we are supposed to do with our own.